Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this record today, which is the debut album by Belle and Sebastian called Tigermilk. So yes, I'll just be doing my usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So for me, Belle and Sebastian have one of the most kind of fascinating kind of like band sort of formation stories going. Essentially they kind of formed initially when Stuart Murdoch met a guy called Stuart David on a programme for unemployed musicians, like in Glasgow, funded by like a local college. Bit of background to Stuart Murdoch: he had so he was about 26 like at this time, so relatively old to be thinking about forming like a band. But basically, like he'd suffered through most of his early 20s and late teens with chronic fatigue syndrome, which basically meant that he couldn't work. Spent most of his early 20s like in like his bedroom sort of thing. Like so, he got a very much a kind of outsider perspective kind of thing, and that's sort of where the kind of motivation for kind of songwriting like came from. So Murdoch and David met like on like this program, and then sort of slowly the band kind of formed like around like this like nucleus. Like so you got Stevie Jackson in like on guitar, like Isabel Campbell on backing vocals, and David Colburn on drums. Now I should have actually mentioned before all of those members joined, I believe it was Stuart Murdoch, Stuart David, and then another drummer who I can't remember like his name, made this EP, which is it's now called like the Dog on Wheels EP. But this predated Tigermilk in terms of like when it was recorded, although this was released I think in 1997, so it came out like a few years after like it was recorded. But this is essentially the earliest like Belle and Sebastian recordings here. Very primitive stuff like on here, but very good though, very interesting recordings here. So yeah, like this was done in towards the end of like 95, like this was recorded. And then, like I said, like they then got like a few more members like on board. Stevie Jackson on guitars, David Colburn on drums, and then it's essentially like kind of like concurrently to being like in like the band. David Colburn was attending a music business course like at like I think it was the same college possibly, but this music business course was being run by a guy called Alan Rankin who had been in a band called the Associates. And basically like every year like on like this course, the kind of end of year assignment for the students was to essentially release like a song or like a single and sort of like do all like the marketing, like the promotion, try and get it like some sort of traction kind of thing, and like it would be released on Alan Rankin's own label called Electric Honey Records. So basically David Colburn brought in like this, essentially like the cassette of like this, like from like the kind of previous like iteration like of like Belle and Sebastian. I don't think they were called like Belle and Sebastian like at like that point. But basically like Alan Rankin heard this and was so impressed that he actually let them do a full album. So it was made very quickly, this album, over a 3-day period at Carver Studios in Glasgow with in-house engineer Gregor Reed doing all the kind of like the engineering stuff, and I think producer, I'm not sure if it's Alan Rankin like who's produced it or if it's just Belle and Sebastian producing, but yeah, it was recorded very quickly, like over, like I said, like a 3-day period, with essentially the band at this point was still very much kind of forming really. Like I think they performed a handful of gigs really and had very little rehearsal time for this, so it's like I'll get onto it like sort of like towards like the end of the video, but it's remarkable how good this album actually is, considering that the band had very much only formed like a matter of like months before like recording it. So it was initially released with 1,000 copies pressed, like I said, like on like Electric Honey Records, and basically the story goes that the band thought, oh god, 1,000 copies there, it's a lot of copies, or like it looks like a lot of copies, so they were kind of like there's legend sort of stories of them like throwing copies of this around like at like the release party, sort of using it like as frisbees, like etc. But basically like these initial 1,000 copies like would eventually sell out like over like a couple like of months, and it then comes to the attention like of like other like record labels, I think Jeepster, like who is like who they would eventually sign with, and some championing like as well from various DJs such as John Peel. They got a Peel session, I think, must have been shortly after like this came out, and Mark Radcliffe as well, very much championing like the band. So following this, like, they'd release a few more albums there, like kind of status and popularity like would grow, become one of the big kind of British indie bands, really, like off like kind of like the late 90s. And so like, but this album was becoming very, very difficult to get. Basically, like all like the copies of it like that had survived like the release party were going for £600-800, you know, like really, really expensive. So like their label Jeepster, like that they were on, decided to re-release it in 1999, and it did really well, actually, like reached number 13 like on the charts, and that probably was the first time most people actually heard like Tigermilk. Okay, so I'll just show you my vinyl copy. So this is a reissue of it, like a much more recent reissue, like even like sort of like beyond like the 1999 reissue, or kind of like more like widestream or like more like widespread like release of it. Just got lyrics on the back of it there, very basic artwork, but I do like it. It's definitely got like kind of DIY kind of like aesthetic to it. Nice labels as well here, just with a few thanks there, and then the band members listed there too. So no, it's a nice, it's a basic but nice package, I think. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each song out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So the album opener is The State I Am In, which is a great opener. I think this song, like all the great Belle and Sebastian, particularly album openers anyway, they really build really well, I think. You know, this one is like, it starts quite quiet, but then sort of like, yeah, like by the end you've got horns on it, you've got all sorts going on, like and it just builds up really, really well. Lyrically, it's a very kind of freewheeling sort of song, telling a kind of, I think, a largely fictional tale, a kind of coming of age sort of tale, about, you know, so many great kind of quotable lines on this about being happy for a day in 1975. I was puzzled by a dream, it stayed with me all day in 1995. Great stuff. And then there's also lines about like my brother had confessed that he was gay, it took the heat of me for a while. So they're quite comical, quite kind of self-deprecating like lyrics, quite obviously got like a bit of a debt to kind of modesty, like unlike the Smiths like on it like as well. His vocals on this are great. They sound very welcoming, very soft and familiar. It sounds like a friend like on like this song, I think. So no, State I'm In is a really great song. I think for a lot of people is like one of the all-time top Belle and Sebastian songs. Yeah, and it is a favourite of mine. Definitely like kind of like I really like appreciate this song. So no, it would get a 10 out of 10. In the queue for lunch, they take the piss, you got no appetite. Next up is called Expectations. Now this one is another really alluring kind of narrative-based song about essentially like a social misfit like at school, and sort of like the expectations like that are like put onto them. He sings like, do you want to work in Debenhams? Because that's what they expect. Start in lingerie and Doris is your supervisor. So yeah, again, they're well written, they're funny, interesting little songs, I think, like on like this album. And then like had like it like sort of like the characters developed like on this one here. It's she's a bit of a misfit like on this, sort of talks about making life-size models of the Velvet Underground in clay. Just, I mean, crazy stuff, but just really, really fun songs, I think. And yeah, I mean, despite all this kind of like adversity like in like the tracks, it does get a bit dark as well. It talks about kind of teachers looking up your skirt sort of thing. So there's kind of hints of darkness like on here. The song itself does retain a kind of an upbeat sort of feel in terms of like there's that motive like you're on top of the world again is the kind of like the chorus, and then there's some good brass work like on it as well, which just adds like a nice lightness of touch to it. So no, Expectations, another really, really great track. Next up is She's Losing It. Now this is a jaunty song, this one here, but again with slightly darker lyrics, essentially about, I think, a girl who, I think is maybe bisexual possibly, who gets sort of tired of sort of going out with men and being essentially like abused by men. She then sort of essentially decides to sort of go with women sort of thing. Like she sings like inch for inch, pound for pound, who needs boys when there's Lisa around. I mean, structurally this song is maybe a bit more straight ahead, a bit more basic, with a kind of verse chorus structure to it. And it's a catchy song. It's a catchy song, certainly, but it's not really a favourite Belle and Sebastian track of mine. I think it's maybe a little bit, maybe not repetitive, but that like in the first moment of waking up, you know, she's losing it. You know, it's maybe a little bit repetitive, but I do still like it though. So no, She's Losing It for me would get an 8 out of 10.
There must be a reason for all the looks we give and all the...
Okay, and then we get a really underrated track for me, like You're Just a Baby, which is such a fun, infectious song, this one here. It's a great arrangement as well. They really rock out on this one. Belle and Sebastian do have a reputation for being very twee and very kind of soft and earnest kind of thing. But this song, they're just firing like on all cylinders, and I love the production on it as well, because it's definitely got that homemade, raw sort of feel to it. It feels like a group who've just gone into a garage, have plugged in instruments, they're just having a good time. It is a great song, this one. Like it's just, like I said, it's just the sound of kind of pure chemistry, like pure organic chemistry. A band who had not really played much, but they just get it together so good, like on like this song. Now, lyrically, this song it's not really clear, I guess, what this is about. You know, it could be about a kind of a sort of child. He sings like you're just going to be going to sort of like school like in the morning, but it sort of interchanges between school like, and work and that. But I love, especially the chorus, that there must be a reason for all the looks we gave pop. It's just brilliant, on point harmonies, and just the sound of this record is great. So yeah, You're Just a Baby is a real favourite of mine. Okay, and then side one closes off with Electronic Renaissance, which is a very different song on the album. I think a lot of people will probably say this is the Ugly Duckling, like on the album, because it wasn't recorded during these sessions. This actually comes from a Stuart Murdoch demo tape he'd made using a program called Cubase, kind of like one like the early kind of primitive like computer sort of programmer, kind of like sort of DIY sort of thing, and like sort of like home sort of programs for making music on. And a lot of people say this doesn't fit the album, and there is some truth in that, but I do think it adds some much needed variety to the album. I think it definitely comes out of the left field, and I think actually does work coming right in the middle like of the album like as well. I think initially there was talk about it opening with this, but that would not have worked, you know. I think this actually does suit, like it's a good kind of palette cleanser, I think, like on the album. It's also quite remarkable. It doesn't really feel dated either. It does have that contemporary kind of lo-fi bedroom sort of pop sort of feel to it. So no, I actually do really quite like Electronic Renaissance. I know it is a song like that divides fans, but I actually do really like it. Okay, and then side two opens up with I Could Be Dreaming, which is a really good underrated song. Like it's a track that I do often forget about like on the album, but it's a great song, a bit more rock in this one again. And lyrically, it's essentially about sort of like one massive long dream sort of thing, living out a kind of fantasy like of like an action film. He sings like I could have ordinary people chasing me from town to town, Mission Impossible, he like sings on it. And it's just a rocking song. I love the production on it, all the kind of like that little keyboard part that comes in like after like the guitar riff. It's just a really fun, infectious track. Quite a long song as well, because it ends with like Isabel Campbell doing a reading from Rip Van Winkle, famously the story of the man who sleeps for 100 days, which is apt considering the kind of subject like of like this song. So no, it's a really good song. Like I Could Be Dreaming would give that one a 9 out of 10.
Why did she do it? Was she scared? Was she pushed?
Next up is We Rule the School. Now this is a much slower, much more delicate kind of ballad like on here. This is much more, I guess if you were to kind of pigeonhole Belle and Sebastian, this is probably what people would think that all their stuff sounds like. But it's a really good song, this one here, essentially about kind of sort of two pieces of graffiti, and how he sort of talks about like why they were put there sort of thing, or like what the motivations was she scared or was she bored, he sings like on it. The track builds quite nicely. It's very, it starts off quite plainly, but then you get some graceful flutes and some nice kind of like you've got like Isabel's cello like on it like as well. So it's a nice song. Not a favourite, not one I'd necessarily go back to too often, but it works really well like on the album. So yeah, We Rule the School would get an 8 out of 10.
6 months on the window stone. This enchanted
Next up, though, is probably the highlight on the album for me, which is My Wandering Days Are Over, which is an absolute early masterpiece, like of Belle and Sebastian. The lyrics could read as being a bit like autobiographical, perhaps like he's talking about my wandering days are over, so perhaps that feeling of being lost, like that he maybe felt like sort of like during like his kind of early 20s, when I said like he was at home sort of suffering like with his chronic fatigue syndrome. Now he was better and he had a band forming around him, so he felt that my life is kind of in gear now, sort of thing, and like sort of going forward. So it's definitely got that real sense of like optimism, like sort of like about it. But then also I think the motivation for this came when he met like Isabel Campbell, like on this one. So he talks about like, you were doing it for businessmen on the piano, Belle. You said you were in living hell, and how his like one man band it is over, sort of thing. So it's quite it could be a kind of autobiographical song about Belle and Sebastian forming, but it's also could just be generally about kind of a more kind of universal song, I guess, just about kind of finding your footing like in life, sort of thing. So no, I really, really like this one. It is one of the longer pieces like on the album, but again, it's a bit like You're Just Baby, just a fascinating track, how it came together and how it was almost, I think like the ending of this track is almost completely like improvised, with Murdoch's kind of like echoey vocals, and then you've got it's Mike Cook is the trumpet player. He's doing some great trumpet work, but apparently all that was just completely improvised like in like the studio, and just everything just naturally fell into place with this. So it's a brilliant song, like My Wandering Days Are Over, and an easy 10 out of 10 for me.
I don't love anyone.
Okay, next up, penultimate track is I Don't Love Anyone. Now, this is probably the weakest song on the album for me. The lyrics are, again, a little bit darker, like in tone. It's got this kind of, semi-upbeat sort of like music to it, a solid kind of rollicking like arrangement, but the lyrics, like I said, are perhaps about a younger person or child, perhaps sort of coping like with physical abuse. He says, and I sort of like the impact like that had, like, I don't love anything, not even Christmas, especially not that, he sings. So they're quite like devastating like lyrics like on this one here, but put to a kind of quite upbeat sort of like clap along sort of like vibe like to like the music, but it does just come across a little bit like a filler. I think they were capable of writing a lot better songs like at like this point, and it just feels a little bit like album filler for me. Okay, and then the album closer is called Mary Jo. Now this song, again, just recently really getting into this album for this review, this song has grown on me so much to the point where I am now giving it like a 10 out of 10. It's essentially this one, like a lot of the songs so far had been about kind of younger people or people like in school, like so like talking like about like kind of like your school days and that, but this song is essentially about like an older woman or like a middle-aged woman who's just kind of is quite lonely, sort of like things like Mary Jo sitting alone drinking tea, she just got home, she wants I don't know what you want, he sings on it. And then it's just like there's some devastating lines like life is never dull in your dreams, and it's just like and he sings like it's a pity that it never works out. It just feels it's a really sad song but really beautiful like as well. And I do also love the kind of circular reference in this back to the title track. So he sings like you're reading the book The State I'm In, because he talks about like in The State I'm In about the priest in that song writing this book like called The State I'm In. So it's it's a good kind of clever circular reference there, like I think, and it's just a lovely song, I think. Again, the strings on it are just gorgeous, and it's just remarkable that like a band who had only just formed were capable of kind of producing something like as beautiful like as this. So overall, this album would be getting 91%. So I think this is a brilliant album. Definitely one of Belle and Sebastian's best albums. Probably my second or third favourite album like off theirs, like I would say. It's just like as I've touched on already, it's a fascinating document of the band kind of forming before like our very ears, and it's just remarkable like how strong like and assured this album is that it contains a handful of the very best Belle and Sebastian songs, particularly State I'm In and My Wandering Days Are Over, are probably like all like top all-time Belle and Sebastian songs, and they were just like right out the gates like on this album. I do think maybe If You're Feeling Sinister, the next one, is slightly stronger. That is a bit more, maybe a bit more consistently strong, and like has a few more kind of signature standout tracks like on it. But I mean, this is by far one of the best debut albums of all time, and also the fact that they both came out like in like the same year, like it's just like absolutely staggering, like how productive like they were. So no, a fantastic record here, Tigermilk, Belle and Sebastian. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed the review of it I've done. If you've got any requests for future reviews, please do leave them down below in the comments, and yet I'll see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.
You know my bip-bopping days are over. I hung my boots up and then retired from the disco floor.